everybody, welcome to Nutricast, which is the BL Biolab podcast. Today I'm here with Natalie Vollen, who is the Business Development Executive at BL Biolab. My name is Andrew Barninger. I'm the Director of Product Development. And in this podcast, we're basically going to go over topics such as contract manufacturing, how to develop supplements, how to work with a contract manufacturer, and all things really health and nutrition related when it comes to dietary supplements.
So Andrew, what about choosing the right ingredients for your custom vitamins?
Really depends on what the customer wants to do. So as you know, we have an onboarding questionnaire that we like to send out to the customers. And that's just to get an idea of what they're really looking for, any potential claims that they want to make about their supplement. But yeah, it's really up to the customer, and through asking questions as is on that questionnaire. So as you know, there's like 30 different questions. It has to do with like, what do you want the product to do? What's the serving size? All this information about the use of the supplement. We'll go through that and we'll be like, oh, okay, so this customer wants a product that helps people with high blood sugar. And then going back to our knowledge of formulation and ingredient efficacy, we'll devise a supplement. We'll put together something that both meets the customer's need for the supplement or target audience for the supplement. And in addition to that, meets their costs. I know there's some certain formulas we work on where the customer's cost is $25 a bottle, which is incredibly high, because if you're thinking of it from an economic standpoint, well, there's no way that they can sell that for anything less than $100, or they're not going to make any money. What I like to do is make the best possible thing that I can. I like making things that are efficacious or that actually work, because with the dietary supplement industry, there's a lot of things that don't work.
That's the whole point.
Yeah. So what I like doing is making something that I know will work. And then, okay, well, I guess I can't give this to the customer at $25 a bottle. All right. Well, what can I bring down in this formula to make the cost more acceptable? And maybe I'm able to cut the cost of that product in half by changing, I don't know, packaging or the versions of certain ingredients. And then we can get the product down to something that is both acceptable for the customer to buy, because they can afford it and they can sell it to their customers at an affordable price, and isn't crazy difficult for us to make. So that's really what it comes back to when we're working with formulating for customers, is trying to gather as much information from them as possible.
Yeah, but like in this case, are you using the just like alternatives or generic ingredients? How does it work? Like what actually gives you a chance to, cut down the price twice, or like, to make it affordable and also still efficient?
You've probably seen like trademarked ingredients.
Of course, yeah. So these are the most expensive ones.
Generally, they're more expensive than the generic versions. So a lot of times, I'm not going to say all the time, but a lot of times a trademarked version is sometimes a patented. So trademark is different from a patent. A trademark is they just filed a special name for this. A patent is, they actually created something that was unique and novel. So with most trademark ingredients, what's interesting is there's actually generic versions that are the exact same thing, and they're a third of the price. So if a customer's like, I want this trademarked version of chromium, I'm like, well, that's $7,000 a kilo. That's expensive, but I can give you a generic version for $1,500. So a lot of times if a customer will come to us and they're like, I want this trademarked ingredient, and this one, but I want it for $7 a unit. I mean, you've received emails from me. I'm like, this person's crazy. There's no way. But then oftentimes we'll talk, or I'll email you back and be like, hey, we're not gonna be able to do that. But what we can do is I can offer alternatives to these ingredients to make it work. And sometimes it's accepted by the customer, sometimes it's not. A lot of times our customers are going to other manufacturers and comparing our prices with other ones, and that's acceptable. I mean, that's how you build a business.
It's kind of like a standard procedure, yeah.
But there's sometimes when a customer will come back and say, well, this other manufacturer gave it to us for $4 a unit cheaper. I'm like, I have no idea how, because I'm just doing the math. I'm just like, if it's the numbers I'm looking at, then like they're losing money on it. So it's really interesting because dietary supplement manufacturing, especially if you have a brand. So aside from the manufacturing part, if you have a brand, a lot of your costs are predicated on volume. So we see this a lot with whey protein. If you just want to order 1,000 units or 500 units of whey protein, there's no way you can be price competitive, because then you got other huge companies out there, like billion-dollar companies, who sell a whey protein product for cheaper than what you as the actual brand can buy it for. And it's really just the economy of scale. So there's certain formulas and certain types of products that there's no way you can order small volumes of, whey protein being one of them.
Yeah, that's something that I, have to explain to our clients when it comes to especially like low MOQs, and they're like, why? Like I can buy it in Costco for this price. Like exactly, because they're producing like probably 200,000, 500,000 of units. That's why they can, have the low cost. And this is impossible if you're ordering like 2,500 units or even less.
Yeah. And a lot of things are like that. Whey protein is just the easy example. But a lot of the ingredients are like that. So if you want to scale your business, you got to do it from the perspective of how do I sell more, not how do I get my product cheaper. Unlike certain businesses where it's like if you're building cars, obviously you want to sell more cars, but there's a lot of things you can do to make your product cheaper. Whereas in dietary supplements, since there's so many people supplying ingredients and there's so many manufacturers, it's important to look at it from a perspective of, well, how do I sell more? Because a lot of these people will be selling me similar products. And the best way for both the brand and the manufacturer to get the best price is to increase that volume of what they're selling.
So let's talk about a real life example. Can you give me like a step-by-step guide to formulating your private label supplement?
Yeah, it really depends on what form factor you want. So it could be capsules, powders, tablets, oils, gels, whatever it may be.
How do you decide like which one to choose?
So that's a really good question, because a lot of times we'll get customers that want this crazy formula, put it in a liquid or a powder where they'll drink it. And I look at the formula and I'm like, you don't want to drink those ingredients. There's a lot of ingredients, especially when it comes to herbs and botanicals, just botanicals in general, whether it be an herb, a root, flower, whatever it is, that taste disgusting. Roots are by far the worst. So if you're talking about like a ginger root or a burdock root, things like that, they taste awful. There's very little that a formulator or a flavor scientist can do to mask those flavors. I'll look at something and a customer will want a liquid or powder, and I'm like, you probably want to pivot and go to a capsule or a tablet, because with these ingredients, it's easier to get customers to want to take it when it doesn't taste awful.
Yeah, but then, they still like they push to have it in a liquid form, but then they complain that their customers are complaining because of the like awful taste that it has, or like smell or something. So how do you deal with this type of issues?
Okay. So I kind of implied that it was impossible. It's not really impossible. It's just really difficult. So for example, one thing that we do is we increase the serving size. So if we're talking about a liquid or a powder, what we'll do is we'll increase the serving size of that formula. So if they want it in a scoop that's 5 grams or a drop that's 2 milliliters, what I can recommend is, okay, well, let's increase that scoop to 10 grams. Let's increase that dropper amount to 4 milliliters, because what we're doing there is we're diluting it. So now we're diluting the gross ingredients, the not tasty ingredients, let me say that. We're diluting them. In a powder, we can dilute it with sweeteners. We can dilute it with random fillers that help just dilute that flavor. In liquids, we're primarily diluting with water. And then there's other things we can do. We can use flavor masking agents, which are specifically designed to mask notes of earthiness or notes of bitterness or notes of sour. So when it comes to flavor science, there's a lot we can do. But what I generally like starting with is diluting the serving size with some type of filler, some type of like water, so that it just spreads out that poor flavor.
But can you give some real examples? Like you had an awful product which tasted very badly and you made your magic and now it's a good product that actually sells well and customers love it.
Yeah, so I was recently working on a liquid dropper that used a bunch of the ingredients I mentioned, a bunch of roots and herbs and botanicals, and it was really gross. It was disgusting. Um, but it's what the customer wanted, so it's what we did. So what we ended up doing was, all right, well, it's a serving size of, I think it was 1 or 2 milliliters. I think we increased it to 3 or 4 milliliters. So we diluted it by about 50%. Well, reality, 100%. And then what we ended up doing is we added some acid to it in the form of like apple cider vinegar, because acids, they do a good job at masking bad, like bitter notes. And then in addition to that, we added additional sweetness. So acid and sweetness is a great way to really mask the flavor of bitter. If we're looking at the 5 flavors on your palate, you have acidic, sweetness, saltiness, bitter, and umami. We don't really deal with umami. That's really, if you're talking about like cooking mushrooms or almonds or nuts or something like that. But we primarily deal with acid, bitter, sour, and sweetness. So between those 4 flavor profiles, we've been able to say, all right, well, if something's bitter, let's add acid and sweetness, because what that's going to do is that's going to mask the bitter flavor but enhance like the sweet flavors. So in a situation that I'm talking about now, that's exactly what we did. We diluted the formula, and then we added more sweetness and acid to it, which got rid of some of those gross flavors that were in the liquid. But going back to your original question on like a step-by-step guide to making a private label supplement, really figuring out the form factor, working with the customer and saying, all right, well, we could do this, but these are the challenges we might have in the beginning. And then once we get past that step, now it's, okay, well, these are the ingredients you want. Based on your form factor, we might need to modify this because you want all of these ingredients, but that's not going to fit into your serving size. So if they want 5,000 milligrams or 5 grams of something, you can't put that into 2 capsules. It just won't work. We might be able to do it in 2 tablets, but they're going to be really, really big tablets. So once we've determined, okay, these are the ingredients we want to use within the delivery system you want, capsule, powder, tablet, whatever it may be, that's when we get to the real R&D process, where it's like, how do we put these things together to either make it taste good, to make it flow, to make it work on the capsule machine or the tablet machine. And that's where I would say 90% of my job takes place, is when we work on a formula, especially a new one. I have a list of ingredients that I'm like, all right, this is going to be challenging to work with. I have to do X, Y, and Z to make this work. From that point, then we'll pilot test it. We'll figure out, can we actually do this? Just because you can think of something, just because you can imagine something should exist, doesn't mean that it can
What
exist.
you're saying can work on paper, but like when you put it into
Yeah.
production, like it can fail right
Yeah.
away. So how often do you do pilot testing? Like, is it required all the time or
All the time.
all the time?
So we start with small scale. We'll do something in a lab, look at the physical and chemical characteristics of a formula. Then we'll move to a small scale pilot batch, which we'll do a kilo or 2. And we'll see, all right, can we scale this up from a lab setting to a small pilot batch setting? And with that, we're looking at the flow characteristics, the encapsulation, the tableting characteristics. Is there any issues we're running into at a small scale? Because issues you run into at a small scale, they're just going to be exacerbated at a much larger scale. So then what I like doing is going from kind of a small scale to a medium scale. So I'll go from 1 or 2 kilos of something up to like 5 to 10 kilos, because then that's that moderate scale. Because at that moderate scale, if we've solved all the problems, it might actually present new problems because we're not using the same equipment. Maybe we have a different type of ingredient that's, for example, we got an extract from this company, but now we needed to order that same extract from this other company. And if you compare them side by side, they're actually different. One might be a different color. Another one might be stickier. It might be drier. So when working with ingredients, that's why we have this whole procedure internally at manufacturing where we have to qualify suppliers, where we have to qualify ingredients, where we have to qualify all these different things we work with, equipment. We have to qualify equipment when we get it. And the reason,
Can you recall some situations when you had a perfect pilot trial, everything went great, then, the order is confirmed, everything is, we ordering all ingredients, all raw materials from our suppliers, we get everything into facility, and then in production, it doesn't work.
What'll happen is we'll do a pilot test and maybe we'll do 10 kilos of something and it works fantastic. And then we had a customer place an order for 10, 15, 20,000 units. So we're running, depending on an order of that size could be up to a ton, so 1,000 kilos of material. So we mix 10 kilos, not a big deal if it doesn't work because it's not that big of a loss. But now you mix 1,000 kilos, you're talking about 2 pallets worth of material. And for some reason, something changed. Maybe we sourced one of these ingredients from a different supplier. Even though we qualified it and it was supposed to work, it was supposed to meet all of the specifications that we wanted and needed, it didn't work. So that's when we'll have to do an investigation and figure out, all right, what happened? So I know from a sales perspective, that's difficult to explain to a customer because they're like, well, you said it worked.
Yeah, it's the worst.
And I'm like, there's all of these different variables, whether it be temperature, humidity, the person operating the equipment that day. Everybody's trained on the equipment who operate the equipment, but one person might just have a little bit more knowledge about something than another person.
So how do we handle this stuff?
So normally when we run into those problems in production, and generally there's one person in the building at all times who's like, this person is what we go to when we're having issues with the encapsulator. This is the person we go to when we're having issues with the tablet press. Me and the R&D team go back and we're like, okay, what can we do to fix this so that they can proceed with minimal issues?
So the good thing that we actually like in not 100%, but mostly we can handle all of these cases, right?
A lot of times it's modifying one little thing on the equipment or adding a little bit more of an excipient, or the excipient, for those who don't know, they're inert ingredients. They don't have any biological or biochemical function, but what they do is we add them to either increase the flowability, so make sure the powder flows good, or decrease the moisture, because if there's too much moisture, maybe we won't be able to make a capsule or make a tablet, whatever it may be. So we could modify the inert ingredients, the excipients.
But some clients are now complaining like they want the formula which has like no fillers, no this, no this, no this, and you're like, okay, what ingredients should I use? You want nothing. You want it to be just like an organic magical formula. How do you handle this when it doesn't work without excipients, but client insists on filler-free formula?
So that's a really challenging one. For those who don't know about dietary supplement manufacturing, is oftentimes we don't add fillers because we want to. And I don't like using that word fillers. I kind of just used it and I stopped myself because I don't like using it, because they're not fillers. We're not just adding them to the formula because we want to take up space or something. They actually have a functional purpose. So for example, 2 common ones are magnesium stearate and silicon dioxide. Magnesium stearate is magnesium and stearic acid. It lubricates the powder, so it allows it to flow better and go into the capsule so the capsule can close.
But like, is it bad for your stomach? Is it gonna hurt? Is it gonna change your routine?
I mean, if you eat a cup of it a day, it probably wouldn't be good. But the 3 milligrams that we put into a capsule that you take once a day, I haven't seen anything that says that little amounts causes any problems. Now, if you take large doses of it, which I don't know why you would, doesn't really make sense to take a very large dose like a cup. Yeah, it would probably cause some problems, but like, that's not common. We use very, very small amounts of these excipients because they're so potent in small doses that we don't need to add a lot. We just add a little bit. just to make the formula work. So that's why it's challenging when a customer says, we don't want anything. I'm like, well, that might be hard. So oftentimes, I mean, you'll get this from us in the R&D department when you send a request to us and we're like, well, they don't want any excipients, but they have these 3 ingredients, which we know will not work without excipients. And that's when you have to go back to your customer and say, hey, this is what R&D said. And sometimes they accept it. Sometimes the customer's like, yep, that's fine. Other times they're like, well, we've had this made at other manufacturers without excipients. And that's when I'm like, yeah, probably not. Because
probably they just lied to you.
Yeah, unfortunately, the dietary supplement industry, because it's not as heavily regulated as like pharmaceutical drugs, like the pharmaceutical industry.
When we had audit from NSF, it was pretty,
It was intense. I mean, it was 3 days,
Mm-hmm.
and it was really intense. I mean, we recently had an FDA audit that was 5 days. And what was interesting about that is the FDA auditor actually found less problems than the NSF auditor.
And less than one of our clients
Yeah,
auditor. This
yeah.
was the funniest part.
Yeah, so that's where it's interesting because the FDA was like, yeah, you guys are really doing things great. But then you have like these third parties that come in who aren't part of the FDA, and maybe they're a customer or maybe they're a third party organization, and they pick out more things because they're more strict, they're more thorough. So from the FDA's perspective, we were better than from the other people's perspective. But it's challenging. We have to make sure that a lot of what we do is documented. We have procedures for a lot of things, and we're doing everything to a T. So what we wrote down that we said we were going to do, we actually do it. We have documentation of us doing it.
Well, we have to admit that also like this, either it's NSF auditing or something else, like it helps us to get better, to, make higher quality products, to maybe get to know some things that were like, okay, we thought it's fine, but they kind of give you a little recommendation what needs to be fixed, and you fix it and you become better and better as a facility. So because our main goal is to produce the highest quality supplements, and kind of like I think there is a good point in being a GMP certified facility as we are, and having kind of passing all this regulations.
Yeah, that is what's good about it. And every time one of those organizations comes in, what they're trying to do is they're finding more and more specific things. It's like, hey, you forgot to mark this off, and it's just like, that's really not a big deal. Everybody can recognize that that's not a big deal. But what they're trying to do is help you get better. So they'll find things that really aren't that big of a deal, but they'll say, hey, we have to cite you for this one because of X. So they give you an explanation. If you look at the results of the audit, they'll explain, hey, you didn't do this, and here's why it's important, and here's the reference, so you can go look it up. And what they're trying to do is just help us get better. So we've met their minimum standards, but now they're helping us get to their highest standards. After 5 or 10 years, they're going to keep coming in and finding less and less and less because of the previous 4 to 9 years. They've basically came in and said, these are all the things that were wrong. These are all the things that we want you to change. And then they give you a deadline. Okay, you need to have this done in 3 months. And then we make all those changes, we update it, and then they come back a year later and they're like, okay, you have less than last year, but these are the 6 things we want you to change. And then they give you a deadline, and they're 3 months from now, you have to have all this done. So it's really just helping you improve. And since we've gone through 2...
It's going to be our third NSF certification this year.
This is going to be our 3rd one. And from the first year to the 2nd year, the number of, I think they called them infractions or citations or whatever they may be.
Citations, I think, yeah.
It was cut in half. So from year 1 to year 2, we cut that number in half. I think the first year we had like 14, and the 2nd year we had 7 or something like that. So, I mean, you could argue we got 50% better. And hopefully for this upcoming one, maybe we have 3 or 4. But the idea is just to help you improve, and that's that's what we're working toward. I mean, BL Biolab, as you know, is a pretty young business. We've only been around for 4.5 years.
No, it's already 6. I thought also like
Really?
Yeah, time flies.
Oh wow.
It's your fourth year in the company, the
Yeah.
same for me. So, but yeah, the facility has been open for almost 6 years now.
But in that time, I mean, we've expanded from what, 15,000 square feet the whole way to, I think we're 70,000
Yeah,
now?
75,000 square feet. Yeah.
I mean, because that originally we're just a small part of that building.
And we're still expanding.
Yeah.
We're getting.
Yeah. So in the last 6 years, BL Biolab has expanded 700%, 600%, which is pretty good.
We're not gonna stop.
Nope.
Let's talk about finding reliable manufacturer. Like, what does it take to find the one? Kind of like the manufacturer you're using, it's the one you have to marry, and you know, it's plays a big role, you know, for a brand. What's the great way to find a reliable manufacturer?
There's a few things you could do as a brand. The first one is, and I think this is the most important, and that's communication. I know you as a salesperson, you're fantastic with communication. So you're constantly in communication with your customers, with other departments within the company. You never leave me alone, and it drives me insane. It's a joke.
Thank you. I mean, that's my work.
But so constant communication. So you want your point of contact at the manufacturer to constantly keep you updated. So like if you're just requesting a quote or requesting samples, it's just like they contact you like every day or two, like, hey, this is the delivery date. Now, if something changes, you want your point of contact to say, hey, this is what happened and this is why we need to move it back 2 or 3 days or whatever it may be.
So communication, first one. What's the second?
I would actually say doing a quick Google search on the manufacturer, looking at like the reviews, maybe on their Google page, or maybe typing like manufacturer plus FDA, because if that manufacturer ever had any like recalls or any problems, you can find it on the FDA website. So the FDA puts all of this information out there for people because it's public knowledge. So you can, for example, if you were to Google BL Biolab and FDA, you would find that back in 2019 we had 1 recall.
And it's about a label, so it's not even a production issue. Yeah,
it wasn't a production. It was we mislabeled something. But that's publicly available information. Now I know if there's some manufacturers, some bigger ones that have been around for a long time. If you Google their name plus FDA, you can find like dozens of problems that they've had over the years.
That's a red flag, right?
Yeah. Especially if it comes to things like they mislabeled something. All right, well, that's common. Labels are difficult. It's probably the hardest part of my job is labeling, just because there's so many little details that need to be taken into consideration.
And regulations get updated all the time.
Yes, they do. For those that don't know, sesame seed was just actually added to the list of the top 8 allergens. It's now the top 9 allergens because the sesame is now considered one of the top 9 allergens. So I didn't find that out until 6 months after it happened.
Interesting.
So it just demonstrates to you that all of these things are ever changing. Now, the good thing about the FDA is they normally give you a couple years to come up to code.
Until they give you a fine?
Yeah. Well, the FDA is not really in the business of fining people. Now, if, say, you manufacture something with shellfish and you constantly forget to put shellfish allergies on your labels and they've cited you 3 or 4 times, if they come back that 4th or 5th time, they're probably going to be like, hey, we got to shut you down because you're obviously ignoring what we're saying and you might hurt people. So if it happens once and you correct it and the FDA comes back and says, yep, they corrected it, and what they'll do is they'll issue the FDA will issue an initial letter. I think it's a 461. I'm going to have to find that one out. It's a letter that they issue that says, hey, we inspected this manufacturer and we found these problems. And what it'll do is it'll outline all of those problems. And it's basically the same letter they send to us. They make it publicly available for everybody to see. And then we have generally 14 days to respond to that and say, okay, we did this to correct this problem. We did this to correct this problem. And then when the FDA reviews that, what they'll do is they'll be like, okay, it's approved. You fixed the problems. And then they'll take your letter and they'll put it on the website as well. So now it's publicly available that everybody can see that the FDA issued you a warning, but you corrected all of their issues.
But as you said, some manufacturers, they have like dozens of those citations and they're still in business. How is it possible?
From what I've noticed, I don't know if this is the rule or whatever it is, but from what I've noticed, it's for different things. So like one citation may be the employees weren't washing their hands. Okay, well, they've corrected that. The FDA comes back 2 years later and they're like, oh, now the employees aren't wearing foot covers. So they corrected that. And then they come back 2 years later and they say they're not testing their raw materials correctly. So it's for different things.
As far as like in different areas, it's fine. All right.
And
does it expire? Like I know that, as you mentioned, like we're going to have this in our history forever. Thanks God it just one. But like the company which has few or like dozens of this citation, like it,
to my knowledge, it's always there.
Always there.
I mean, I've seen things back to 1997.
So yeah, manufacturers have to be cautious
about
it.
Yeah. So yeah, that would be the second thing. So really investigating your manufacturer.
And we briefly talked about labeling and how label compliance is not an easy thing. But can you tell about me, like we have packaging and labeling with a manufacturer where X works model. So we do it all, pretty much full cycle. How would you explain the process of packaging labeling and then it goes to manufacturing?
Packaging is lightly finalized, and I want to say lightly finalized. It's probably not the best way to put it, but that's how I'll say it. In the beginning, so when we give a quote, we're going to say, all right, it's going to go into a 200 cc PET bottle. And then, but because we know that like certain capsules, we can fit 90 capsules in that bottle. But then we go through the R&D process and we're like, oh, we have to increase it to 4 capsules. Well, that bottle will no longer work because it won't hold that many capsules. So what we have to do next is increase it to a 250 cc. Now there's a bunch of things that change.
And explain for the people who doesn't know like what 200 cc is, like just that.
Okay, so most bottles are generally measured in cc. And
it's in milliliters kind of thing, like it's reference.
Okay. Yeah, so 1 cc is equivalent to 1 milliliter. So 200 milliliters is equivalent to like 5 ounces approximately. And then, so there's standardized sizes for all of our bottles. Then they're generally standardized across the board for all companies that produce bottles. So you have 50 cc, 100, 120, 150, 200, and go the whole way up to 950 cc's. And they're just bottle sizes. And then you can jump over to jars, and jars follow the customary convention of being in ounces. So you can get 2 ounce, 4 ounce, 6 ounce, and don't know why it's like that, but there's basically all packaging is standardized across the board.
In packaging, we can use the one that we can source here in the US, and also we can source some packaging overseas. When we're talking about custom packaging, what options can we offer to our clients?
So custom packaging is challenging. It's very challenging because you're oftentimes working with glass or plastic. And both of those things, for some reason, you have this really custom shape that you want. But you're only ordering 1,000 units. There's no way we will be able to get you that custom shaped bottle at that little volume. Because if from a packaging manufacturer, the people who actually make the plastic or make the glass, there's a lot of work that goes into doing that. I don't know a lot about packaging, but I know that for them to make a certain design, they have to create a mold. Now they have to create that mold, but now they have to create that mold on scale. So maybe instead of just making one mold, they're making a mold that has 1,000 different or 100 different impressions. Well, that's a lot of time, effort.
But what if they just like, they're fine with the shape of the packaging being standard, but like what if they want just little like, I don't know, pinkish color or something? Like what is if it's just a color? Is it still high MOQ for packaging?
It is, and that's because since it's not a standard color. So you have standard colors for different. So generally we have HDPE plastic and PET plastic. There's other types, but those are the 2 standard ones.
Like white, black.
White and black are pretty standard. As soon as you deviate from white or black, or clear. Now the manufacturer of those plastics have to do a custom color. And coloring plastic is like coloring anything else. If you want this certain shade of burgundy, well, you have to work with it. You got to find the ingredients that make that specific shade of burgundy. Plastic manufacturing is the same way. They have to find a way to color the plastic that specific shade of burgundy. That's a lot of work and effort. So you can't really order 1,000 bottles. It's not worth the time of the manufacturer to make it.
So if you're looking for something this custom and this specific, you have to kind of look forward for an order of 10,000 units or something.
More like 50.
50?
Yeah.
Wow.
When I've requested custom packaging in the past, even if it's just custom colors, MOQ has been 50,000 units. So it's a commitment. It's an upfront investment on the brand side to purchase something like that. So they have to be really committed to doing that.
The good thing, we can store this packaging in our facility, right?
Yeah, that's what's great about packaging is it's really not heat sensitive unless, I mean, you heat it up to 100 degrees.
Which we do not.
Which we do not, because we have temperature controlled storage. So good thing about packaging is it's not really that heat sensitive.
It does not expire as ingredients.
Yeah, so we can store that really in perpetuity. Obviously, if we store it for too long, we have to take it out. We have to sterilize it before we use it because we didn't want anything getting in it. But that's the good thing about packaging. So if you're a brand that wants this hyper-specific packaging, what we can do is maybe we order the 50,000 units and we store 20,000. You just use 30 or whatever it may be. But that's what's good about packaging. It's easier to store. It's a pain to store because it's so big, but it's easily storageable.
But when it comes to labels, like what's complicated about labels and the whole label compliance procedure?
So I would say my biggest pet peeve when it comes to that is a customer has a specific image of how they want their label to look, but the way they design it is not in compliance with what is required. So
by FDA.
By the FDA. So this isn't our requirement. This is the FDA's requirement. Like 40% of the panel needs to be this part, and then 30% needs to be this part, and then these font sizes need to be a specific size. And then there's minimum font sizes, there's minimum required information, there's certain things that have to be bold, other things that are not allowed to be bold. It just gets really, really specific. So the challenge when working with customers is they want to design something that's aesthetic. And I respect that and I understand that. But the problem is just because it's aesthetic doesn't mean that it's compliant. So you've seen our internal label review process. There's 3 or 4 people involved on every single label. We have a 6-page checklist that we go down. We have literally hundreds of templates because it's like you have this bottle with these dimensions and this is the template you have to use. So you have to use this template. It needs to be on these dimensions and everything.
But still, like I don't want to disappoint our clients. Like it is possible to make a good looking label even if it follows all the FDA regulations and it's compliant label. Because like yeah, when we send the guideline and people are like, oh wow, you can't even use the made in USA claim now. Yeah, can kind of sound stupid because the product is manufactured in the USA, but you have to use all of this like manufactured in the US with globally sourced ingredients. What do you think about it?
So that's where a lot of the label stuff that we deal with is there's FDA requirements, but the organization that enforces it is actually the FTC or the Federal Trade Commission. And what they do is they go around, they can look at labels and say, oh, are you using this unapproved claim like made in the USA? And they actually have a guideline for that. I wasn't aware that they had a guideline for that up until about a year ago. But when you say made in the USA on a product, it literally everything about it, both the package, the contents, all the ingredients, everything need to be made in the USA.
But imagine when it says like on a dress or I don't know, a purse or whatever made in Italy, it doesn't mean that all the ingredients, you know, for this material, for the fabric are all from Italy. Obviously they're not, but it's kind of like a standard. Also, like if it says made in China, maybe some of this, I don't know, glass or whatever is not from China.
Quite possibly, yeah. And that's where the confusion and like the nuance comes from, because like you don't really know. So
honestly, I do not know.
yeah.
Like I need to explain it to the customer so we follow the guidelines. But I just like, it doesn't make much sense to me, because this is one of our biggest advantages, that we're the facility and we operate here in the US, and we produce products made in the USA. And with this kind of like regulations, it's bringing our advantage a little down, which I don't like.
It is. It's one of those things that it's a kind of a marketing claim for our customers. So when we say, hey, you can't say it this way, you have to say it this way, it's a challenge for them, because they're like, well, we just lost a big marketing claim. So I understand the difficulty from the perspective of sales.
And like, I don't want to go into politics and all of this stuff, but, from the government, even it says like, you have to promote American, like, American, da da da. We are an American facility, and we can't use this claim, and mostly like our customers cannot use this claim. So it's challenging, and I hope one day we can fix it.
Yeah.
Because, we're a community and business, that's something that builds economy, and it's not just, we're doing it to make money. We want to help people with our supplements. We want little, bigger, I don't know, medium-sized businesses to make money and succeed. And with this type of claims, if something is, too over-regulated and doesn't let business to thrive, I don't think it's a good thing.
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge.
But let's talk about marketing and selling products. Like when it goes to, we produce the perfect supplement. What's next? I know you're R&D and I'm more on the sales and marketing, but like, how does it look from your perspective? What would you probably advise to, like, what product to pick, like what to do? Like, for example, if you're going to become a business owner tomorrow and create your own supplement, what's your good piece of advice?
From a marketing and advertising and sales perspective, I would say learn all you can about your supplement and your ingredients. And there's great tools, Google being one of them. Now I know a lot of the information is not correct, but you can get a general sense of like what the ingredients do, which would help you with your marketing claims and your advertising, and like if you're selling on Amazon, your product page. There's a lot of information on there. And also oftentimes the person formulating it, for example, me, there's been many times you've asked me, hey, what can the customer say about this? And there's sometimes when I give you something really brief, but then there's other times, I mean, I remember one customer, I basically wrote you a dissertation.
Absolutely. I appreciate that.
Everything that they could say about it.
And they were so impressed. They were like, your R&D is the best R&D you can ever meet. I was like, this is true.
And yeah, so learning about the ingredients, learning about the supplement, what it does, what it was designed for, why they included these ingredients versus these ones, that'll really help you from the sales perspective. And then next thing I would recommend is figuring out the easiest way to distribute it. So like Amazon's a good resource, but it's challenging to sell on Amazon because they've gotten really strict. Especially
right now. It's like kind of cherry on the top. Like you have to use other marketplaces, influencers, whatever, like to get successful. So Amazon is just like one of the channels of your sales, right?
Yeah.
And they're getting more strict.
Yeah, those are the two things: figuring out your distribution and figuring out how the benefits of the product so that you can market it.
All right. Let's talk about trends a little bit. Like, this year is all about, or it's already 2024. So last year was all about AI and ChatGPT and all this type of stuff. Do you use these tools in your work, or like as a chemist, as a R&D hat?
I do. Yeah, I oftentimes use it for example, sometimes a lot of my background is in like metabolic diseases. So like cardiovascular disease or diabetes or metabolic syndrome or weight loss, things like that. So those topics I know a lot about. I can formulate a weight loss supplement. I can formulate a pre-workout. I can do a whey protein. No issues.
By the way, sorry for interrupting, but like the weight loss that we that you actually developed last year is just best-selling product. This is my client, and they're
really?
Yeah, it's
Fantastic.
number one bestseller product in weight loss category on Amazon this week.
Fantastic. That's
Yeah.
awesome. I'm glad.
So thank
And
you.
is that the one that I did?
Yes, you did it.
Oh,
I'll show you.
fantastic.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
can't tell you the client's name right now as we're on the Nutricast. Yeah,
Okay.
good
No, that's
job.
fantastic. I think I remember it.
Mm-hmm.
But
AI, we're talking about
oh
AI.
yeah. So I'll use it for kind of figuring out best combinations of ingredients. But then I've also it's gotten so sophisticated now that when it comes to like what ingredients to use, I can generally figure that out by myself. I'll go dig into some research and figure out, all right, this one, and this one will make the best combination. But then I've began using it for like if we have a challenge. Like earlier on, we talked about like challenges in manufacturing and how we get things to work when they're not working. I've actually used different AI tech tools to say, hey, I'm having this problem. What can I do to fix it? And then it'll write me 1,000 words of like, hey, you could try this, or you could try this, or you could try this. And there's been many times when I've done that and it's given me recommendations that I've gone and tried and it worked amazingly. So that's what I've been using it for more recently, is more of the super technical things, the things where it would take me hours to find the answer, where with a tool like ChatGPT, it'll actually like consolidate it into 30 seconds and it'll just give me everything that I need to know. But it allows me to be faster at certain things. And, you know, our owners, they're all about like speed and efficiency. So that's where it's been useful, because I'm like, I can figure things out more quickly. And that's what's important.
What do you think? Is it possible that AI eventually can replace real people for like, I don't know, R&D formulators or the?
Oh yeah, 100%. As much as I hate to say that, there's actually some tools that currently exist that you plug in all your ingredients and it'll spit out a